Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. So this is part 3. Point number 17. Honest leadership and oversight are key. Point number 18. Reaganomics did not work, and the IT boom confuses, as well as the spending in the defense sector. Reagan added like $2 trillion to the debt, and consider inflation, that may very well be like $8 to $10 trillion in today's money, or whatever it is, right? Consider inflation. And again, the IT boom, TVs, computers, software, video games, the Silicon Valley. But think about what happens when you spend so much money on defense and the internet is coming out. Think about the domino effect from all those things. The reason why the economy expanded was because of spending that money on defense and the IT boom. It was not because you gave tax breaks to the rich. And the wages of the middle class were stagnant, and the wages of the poorest people declined. And Reagan cut funding for programs to help the poor, like food stamps and school lunches. And keep in mind, before he was in office, the debt was at $914 billion. Okay. And so eventually it balloons to $2.7 trillion. So he just paid for the economic expansion. The money didn't trickle down, and he cut, funding for programs. When what he should have been doing is increasing funding for programs, and he should have been putting a special emphasis on housing for homeless people. He should have ended it back then, when homelessness was nowhere near as bad as it is now. And they should have stayed on top of it this whole time. Because when Reagan left office in 1989, that's a long time ago, right? That's 36 years ago. For just like $3 billion a year on average, progressively, okay, with inflation considered, because it was a lot cheaper to build back then as well. Okay, so for the equivalent of $3 billion a year in today's money, we could have no homelessness right now. We could have a surplus of several 100,000 units, apartment units, and even more if we did it with tiny homes. So the logic isn't there. Also, by the mid-90s, the top 1% owned 40% of the nation's wealth, which is double what they owned in the 70s. They only owned about 20% of the nation's wealth in the 70s, and by the mid-90s, they owned 40% of the nation's wealth. So the money didn't trickle down, and the rich got richer. And the economy only expanded because the IT boom was happening anyway, and because of the defense spending. Okay. When it comes to, things that are out of the ordinary, that weren't happening on their own anyway, what have you. So, point number 19. People die because Americans don't value human life enough. And they don't appreciate what trickle-down economics is. They don't understand that we have always had a trickle-down economic system. The opposite of a trickle-down economic system is a system where there's massive investments in the poor and in startup companies. Okay? And there's a special emphasis on, the lower middle class and the poor. Trickle-down economics exists because of white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy and the token minorities that are upholding it as well. And it's their motives have to do with sexual sadism, sexual control, being control freaks, okay, mere human rules, customs, and traditions, Greco-Roman thinking, right? The Greeks and the Romans were animals. They were slave masters who abused people to the extreme. Look it up. And that is the foundation of modern Western culture, no matter how you slice it. It's based on a Roman system, and there's all kinds of, Roman and Greece that go hand in hand. The Greek deities and Roman deities were nearly identical, and the deities affected the culture, including the Capitoline Mint, right? The culture of finance, their economic system. Point number 20. A moral free market economy is greater than capitalism, where capital is the point. The economic system is a philosophical system. So therefore, instead of them having morality as the point in reality, not in the propaganda system, the point is capitalism. The point is to uphold rich, white, Jewish, and LGBT people, and to allow for some people to come from, the lower middle class, what have you, into wealth like Rockefeller did, like Elon Musk claimed to have done, and what have you. Okay, in order to continue their oppressive system, their old money system, their system of insanity. So as you look at the system, you look at the motives, it doesn't quite make sense. Part of that is the LGBT component. If you look up gay in the Urban Dictionary, at least I've posted it before, I think they buried that definition and they added a bunch of other definitions to confuse it. But it used to mean, used to be defined as, stupid and pointless. No offense to anybody. So when someone in the Bay Area would say, hey, that's gay, what they were saying is that is stupid and pointless. Now, keep in mind that this argument came from white people and probably gays themselves. It refers to the behind-the-scenes operations of the white, Jewish, and LGBT community together. And since they kind of threw in together to make sure that things go smoothly, because gays were very much involved in the underworld, and it's a long story why that is. Have to do with prison culture, has to do with, so many things. Even gypsies. I can go on and on about why that is, right? Look at San Francisco, look at Oakland, look at how, these things come together. New York, Los Angeles. It's a long story why that is. Hollywood. But anyway, they're part of it, and what the other groups considered worthwhile was using homosexuality to kind of throw people off, turning people out, creating certain, and making it so they're unfocused and scatterbrained, so they couldn't kind of come together in a solid way and face their oppression. When you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, there's a large degree of LGBT activity there, and it was very uncontrolled. You see a bunch of scatterbrained people everywhere. Every once in a while, one of them was more on point. Maybe they were a communist. I'm not a communist myself, but sometimes communists are more focused than a lot of these activists. But you saw a lot of kind of strange LGBT behavior taking place. And in the midst of that kind of chaos came some gang members looting and so on and so forth. So anyway, point number 21. Social order, is a huge part of economics. You have four main options. A moral order, an immoral order which they don't admit is immoral, and an immoral order which they admit, and the fourth is anarchy. We do not have a moral order in this society. We have what is best described as an immoral order which they don't admit is immoral. Point number 22. The debt is in dollars. A lot of people don't understand what that means here. The dollar has lost a lot of value over the years, and the national debt is in dollars. So it's easier to pay off than you might think. So if we added $100 billion to the debt, keep in mind it's $100 billion. The economy is expanding. Money doesn't have that much buying power. For example, if a house that costs $1 million right now costs $10 million, and the economy was somewhat in step with that, then, it's not such a big deal to pay off $10 million from the debt, for example, because it doesn't have a lot of buying power anyway. The debt is in dollars, and the dollar isn't that valuable right now. It doesn't mean that the debt is easy to pay off, but it's easier to pay off than you might think. That's something to think about. And there's a lot of ways to describe it. There's a lot of ways to try to help you understand it, but you should understand with that house example. Stay tuned for the next part of this series, It's about to get very interesting.